Genetics is a real kind of interesting thing. Folks tend to think that there's this one gene that
Right,
makes your eyes a certain color, and this one
right,
gene
right,
that makes you tall or short, but
right.
we're finding out that's not really how it
Now we're not
works.
finding it out. We've known it. The
Mm,
mainstream, the average person hasn't known it because
mm,
they simplify things to make it palatable to the lay public, and so you get this. And plus, it lends itself to selling medicines and
mm,
selling drugs. Oh, we have this new drug. It's going to take care of this one gene that causes cancer, or you can have a surgical procedure because you have this gene that causes
mm,
cancer. It's not how it works.
mm,
Genes are complex. Genetics is complex. Genes interact with each other in this complex way so that the sum is great. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
mm,
And there's interactions, and genes jump, and genes communicate with each other, and they change. And it's really quite silly to anybody who understands genetics. Now, the mainstream doesn't. Even a lot of physicians don't necessarily understand it. But if you understand genetics, you understand that you can't just manipulate genes in order to get better or to get healthier or to change the likelihood of getting some kind of disease.
mm,
This is where epigenetics comes in, and Doc's been talking about it for decades. I learned about epigenetics in the 1980s in pharmacy school,
mm,
and that's really where you want to start to work, is with the factors that turn genes on and off. Every thought you think has an effect on your genetics.
mm,
Every experience you have has an effect on your genetics. The foods you eat have an effect on your genetics. Certainly the nutrition you take or don't take has an effect on your genetics. That's where we really want to learn to work. This idea that it's in your genes disempowers us.
mm.
You've heard people say, "Oh, I have diabetes because my mother
Yeah,
had
right,
diabetes.
right, right,
It's
right.
in my family." Most of the people that we hang out with don't say that, but the average
Mm,
person still says things like that. I have this disease because it's in my family. And there's a certain kind of condemnation. You're condemned to whatever your family genetics are.
mm,
When you have this idea, and it disempowers you, it takes away, it allows you to abdicate responsibility for
mm,
your own life.
mm,
On the other hand, if you understand that how you live your life will change your genetics, you have control over whether you get sick, over how healthy you are, over how long you live, how you'll respond to stress and duress. So the idea that you're condemned to your genetics just is flat out not true.
mm.
And if Dr. Bruce Lipton was talking about it in the early 2000s, if I was learning about it at pharmacy school in the 1980s, there's really no reason why we should still have this belief in the mainstream that our lives depend on how our genes were formed when we were born or in the womb. Doc sometimes gets in trouble for saying there's no genetic diseases, right?
Mm,
He'll say, "How can you say that? Cystic fibrosis and Tay-Sachs disease." And what he means is that those diseases are the end result of epigenetic
mm, right.
problems that were happening in the womb. The mother was deficient in B vitamins, or the mother was eating a lot of sugar, or the mother didn't get some essential fatty acids or something, so the genetics changed. So, he says that there are no genetic diseases, and what he really means is even the diseases that we consider to be genetic are really based in epigenetics. And by the way,
Right.
Doc has an amazing book called Epigenetics, which it's not all about epigenetics. Only the last few chapters are. It's really a history. It's really super cool book. It's a
Mm,
history of medicine, and the last few chapters are the chapters on epigenetics. And so that's where we get our power from, and that's really what this whole idea, everything we talk about, everything Doc talks about, everything longevity talks about, is really about empowerment, about taking control of your health. And the idea of epigenetics really exemplifies this
mm.
idea that we have power over the most fundamental nature of our body, which is our genetics.
So something like hope, for instance, changes.
Yeah.
I've seen people. You've talked about trying to get people to open up. I've worked with a lot of developmentally disabled folks for several years when I was younger, and I remember this one guy who was just tied in a knot.
Oh,
All his
yeah.
muscles were just
Mm.
taut, and it was. And I remember sort of looking at him and just thinking that if he was able to just relax his body, his entire
Right.
shape would change. He would
Right.
go from being this very hunched over person that was prone to constipation and all sorts of other
It's
sorts
all
of pains.
contracted.
Yeah.
Dr. Wilhelm Reich talked about this idea that there's two basic movements in life,
Mm,
contraction and expansion. And he said diseases are caused by micro contractions. He called it body armoring. He said every time we experience a small amount of stress, we micro contract. And over the course of a lifetime, we get these zillions, I don't know, so like thousands of micro contractions all over our body. And all over our body, all over where you have micro contractions, you have little pockets of hypoxia, of low levels of oxygen. And it's the accumulation of these low levels of hypoxic areas, these micro contracted areas that end up leading to dis-ease, out of ease. But here's where it gets really cool. He said that when those pockets are released or they're opened up, energy comes out, and that energy feels really good, akin to the energy of an orgasm. Think about an orgasm. A sexual orgasm is contraction and then expansion. He called this orgone energy.
Right.
You've heard this, right?
Yeah.
Orgone energy. And I read a book a long time ago, a little tiny little book, maybe 100 pages, by this actor Orson Bean. Do you ever hear Orson Bean? Before your time. He's from the 60s. And anyway, he was a theater actor, and he was, did some sitcoms, I think. He was on television. But he wrote a book called The Orgone in Me. And he talked about having this Reichian therapy done where they released the microcontractions and had this orgone energy come out. And he talked about what it felt like to have this orgone energy. And the way he described it, it was the most beautiful experience. It was like this long, protracted orgasm where he just felt ecstatic and blissful just from having his micro contractions released. And it's very interesting because Dr. Wilhelm Reich, who talked about this and developed this idea called Reichian therapy, he wrote many books about the idea of contraction and expansion. He actually called it body armoring, where your body is, where you have all these micro contractions, you form like an armor. Another guy named Alexander Lowen also talked about them. This is all called bioenergetics. And it's very interesting what happened to Wilhelm Reich. He talked about how orgone energy and was associated with cancer, and trapped energy was associated with cancer, and cancer was the sign of contractions, microcontractions. Well, he ended up going to prison for saying that, and he ended up dying in jail or in prison just for saying this stuff. And this was in the 1950s. Wilhelm Reich, R-E-I-C-H, very interesting guy. But he wrote a ton of books about cancer and about microcontractions and even about the nature of evil. He was a very brilliant and prolific writer.
Yeah, I've certainly heard of him. I haven't read any of his works, but I'm very into that kind of thing.
He was a brilliant guy. So your point is well taken. We experience these micro contractions throughout life, and you can actually see it in older people. When they get older, they kind of contracted and hunched over. One of the best things you could do if you're starting to get older, even in your 50s or 60s, not even really that old, and you're starting to notice this thing, is stretch. And that's where yoga comes in. Yoga is really, hatha yoga and ashtanga yoga, these physical yogas, are really very elaborate positions where you actually stretch your musculature. And that's how they used to think that you could get spiritual and establish connections with spirituality and spiritual energy by becoming more limber. But even if you don't want to get into the spirituality of it, just for keeping your body loose and flexible as we get older. And there's a lot of pain, of course, that's associated with these contractions and the kind of shriveling up that occurs as we get older. So stretching is a great way to eliminate pains, body pains, neuropathies, for example, arthritises and swollen joints, just simple stretching. And even if you're really, uncomfortable in your body, stretching can be an amazing way to become more comfortable in your body and to actually relieve pain.
I'm just having this vision of this. It was a friend's mother a long time ago in my childhood, maybe when I was a teenager or something like that. And she had some kind of, she had tennis elbow, and she loved to play tennis, but she couldn't anymore because of the tennis elbow. And I remembered seeing her. Now, her son and I hadn't really spent much time together for a few years, but she had this look on her face of just such utter contempt. So it was actual contempt.
On her face, even.
She was so angry at the world, and she looked at me, and it's like she didn't even recognize me. And I sort of smiled and waved, and she didn't care. She was in this very dark place. And I remember thinking, it's funny that you think it's your tennis elbow that's causing you to be this way. I wonder if the converse isn't true. That you're
probably a circle.
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
Go together. Well, we know that just smiling will activate dopamine and serotonin and feel-good hormones. Just turning your lips upward in a smile will make you feel better. I remember reading Anthony Robbins, and he was talking about how it's impossible to be depressed if you hold your chin up and your chest out. It's impossible to be depressed. So the relationship between posture and mood is very important. And obviously, if posture is associated with biochemistry, there's also health implications too. And that's why, coming back full circle to this idea of genetics.
Right.
These are all ways that we can take control of our health. Something as simple as turning your lips upward in a smile or holding your chin up can have beneficial effects on the way on the type of hormones that you're secreting, and thus the type of body that you're forming. Hormones are really the key, because what we're talking about, how your thoughts affect your genetics, your posture affects your genetics, nutrients affect your genetics. Really, what that's about is hormones. Because every time you think a thought, a hormone is produced, and that hormone has an effect on the genetics. So the thoughts interact with your genes via this mediating chemical, this mediating molecule that we call hormones, and that's what a hormone is. A hormone is a mediating molecule that connects your genetics or something in your body, if it's not your genetics, but there are steroid hormones that affect your genetics, with something you're doing in your life. Hormones are the way the outside world gets turned into the inside world, or they're the way the invisible world, if you're talking about thoughts, get turned into the visible world. The way hormones are magical in that sense. They make the invisible visible.
I love it. Now, Ben, what sort of role does gut bacteria have in this
That's
ecosystem?
Interesting. Yeah, gut bacteria make hormones. Gut bacteria will interact with your cells, and they will communicate to your cells and change the way they'll change the genetics of your cells. In fact, there are genes in gut bacteria that can contribute to your genetic profile. So when we talk about your genome, all the genes that are in a cell, you have to include the microbiome's genome, the genetics in the bacteria, because they act like a reservoir of genetic material. So it's almost like there's no separation between the cells of the microbiome, these bacterial cells, and human cells, because they interact with each other at the genetic level. And gut bacteria stimulate I don't know if they make necessarily hormones for us, but they turn on hormone activity in our cells. Gut bacteria are ridiculously powerful. We talk about gut bacteria for digesting our food and the importance of digestive health, but it turns out that when gut bacteria eat specific foods, especially fiber, prebiotics, you've heard the term prebiotics,
right.
These are food for the probiotics,
Yes.
They release molecules that support your heart, that support brain health, that make your muscles grow, that open up blood vessels, that have appetite suppressant effects, that help you sleep. So the secretion byproducts of these bacteria, as they're eating things like fiber, actually produce feel-good molecules that give you a better life. These bacteria are almost like your health angels.
Right.
They're there to give you a better life, but you have to take care of them. And one of the most important things you could do is eat fiber. I'm going to have I don't know if you've heard of the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
You heard of this? That's where you only eat meat. You don't eat vegetables, or you only eat animal products. You don't eat veggies. And one of the problems with the carnivore diet is if you're not eating vegetables, you're not going to get fiber. And so there are a lot of these carnivore guys, and I'm going to have one of them on my radio program this week, and because I've been wanting to ask them this. They say, "Oh, you don't need fiber," and they say you don't need fiber because there's no essentiality to fiber. You can live without fiber, and there's literature that shows that you can have regular bowel movements without fiber. But what they're missing is the fiber acts to support the bacteria. Forget your digestive health. I'm not even talking about that. The fiber makes the bacteria healthy, so the bacteria can produce things like butyrate and short-chain fatty acids that improve your mood and have antidepressant effects and improve athletic performance and help build muscle and help you sleep and have a whole wide range of benefits, which I'm going to ask this guy, Dr. Baker, who I'm going to have on the radio program in a couple of days. I'm going to say, yeah, okay, I've heard you talk about fiber, how it's not important for digestion, and I don't know if I agree with that, but even aside from that, how do you dispute the fact and how do you get around the fact that fiber is critical for the production of short-chain fatty acids, which have a whole host of feel good and anabolic and immune boosting benefits. That's the thing. We are intimately connected with our environment. And they used to say there was this thing, nature versus nurture, the combination of nature, and it really is kind of a combination, but it's mostly nature.
Right.
You know, there are certain things that are hardwired into us, but the nature component of it is so profound and so deep and so intense that it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to marginalize it. We lose such power over our bodies when we marginalize nature over nurture. We marginalize the power of nature. Even just the foods we eat, even just the food choices we make. You know, something as simple as deciding to eat processed foods is going to have a powerful impact on your genetics.
I was thinking the other day about the feudal system. My wife and I are big history dorks. And,
I am too. Medieval history?
And I was thinking about how... actually, we were watching a documentary where they're talking about the diet of the peasants and the lower classes compared to what the knights and nobles would be.
They ate better, probably.
They ate a lot less meat.
Yeah, and they ate more veggies.
But I also kind of imagine these huge, big, strong, burly knights. It would be these very intimidating characters. They're sitting there, you know, eating half a cow every night, and they've got all these sort of beef hormones and meat calories going on.
Well, you know, gout is the disease of kings.
Oh, right.
From all the sweets that they ate, relatively high amounts of sweets they ate, purines from meats. Now, I would not have wanted to be a serf though in the Middle Ages. You know, they did not have a good life.
Right.
But if they were eating vegetables.
Lucky to make it to 28, for sure.
Yeah, they were lucky to make it to 28. Usually about 22. And they looked like they were probably 50, 72.
Yeah, they had 3 remaining teeth, you know.
Yeah, 3 teeth. And they were like pregnant. They had 10 kids or something by the time they were 20 or some ridiculous, because they would get married when they were 11 or 12 because they only had 10 more years of life after that.
Yeah, you're running out of time at that point.
Running out of time.
Over the hill. I also remember reading about a certain area in India where there was a culture where the religious character would be chosen. I called him a Brahmin or something like that, and he would be chosen at birth and then fed a very unique diet throughout his life. His skin would end up being more pale than everybody else's.
Really?
And
intentionally, they wanted him to be pale?
Yes, and the other thing was he would always be in a little bit of pain. He would always have this digestive...
They wanted him to... That was done intentionally?
To intentionally create a character who is empathic.
Oh, interesting.
Or something along those lines. I found that absolutely fascinating. But when you talk about how the nature affects you, regardless of what your genes are, that's one of the things that comes to my mind. Right. How based on what you're putting into your body and based on what's going on inside your small intestine, it can change your whole personality. It can change your appearance.
Absolutely. Your microbiome affects your personality. The bacteria in your gut. Well, you make food choices, at least partially, based on the kind of bacteria you have. It's not even you making the food choices. The bacteria are making the food choices for you. I don't know if you remember this, about maybe 20 years ago, maybe more, maybe 25 years ago or so, there was a substance out in the world called GHB. Mm-hmm. Remember GHB?
I think I do.
It was like a date. They banned it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Now I know what
GHB is gamma hydroxybutyrate. And gamma hydroxybutyrate is a derivative of something that's made in the microbiome. Butyric acid, which we talked about just a little bit ago. Well, it turns out the GHB's got incredible effects on your brain. It's one of the best aphrodisiacs you'll ever use, using it as medication. That's why they were using it as a date rape drug. And it's also a sleep aid. And it's also a relaxing substance. In fact, GABA, you probably heard of GABA.
Yeah.
GABA aminobutyric acid is a derivative of these. It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Kind of relaxes you, it calms you down, balances out excitotoxins. For folks who are worried about excitotoxicity, you can use it to help to fall asleep. You can buy it as a supplement. It's produced as a derivative, something that comes out of the microbiome. So there's an important relationship between your mood, your personality, your mental health, your brain health, and the microbiome. And we think of the microbiome as only being important for the digestive system, but it's important for the heart, for the muscle system, for the immune system, for the brain. It's important for all kinds of, for the liver, for the blood, for the circulatory system. It's important for almost every system in the body. The microbiome is. So when you take probiotics, you're supporting your heart and you're supporting your blood vessels. And, one of the things with COVID, one of the big problems with COVID is coagulopathy. It's it has a tendency to clot the blood, to thicken the blood. And that's why you have a lot of these disseminated symptoms on your skin and your nervous system and your heart and in your brain, aside from respiratory problems. So anything you can do to open up the blood vessels and improve the flow of blood will help you deal with COVID symptoms. And if you, God forbid, were to get COVID, you'd have a much better, easier time with the symptoms if your blood was moving smoothly. And one of the best things about the microbiome is it supports your circulation.
I might sound a little nuts saying this, but I don't always think that there's one entity when there's a person. I think that there's this complex relationship of a whole bunch of odd bits and ends. There's a bunch of different parts of our brain that are all, luckily, hopefully, all getting along. And really, we're kind of like the soul is like a conductor conducting this strange orchestra of elements.
What you're saying. That would account. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and the gut bacteria is, kind of like a little friend that lives inside you, in a way.
I see it that way. That accounts. That's this idea of multiple aspects of us. It reminds me of when some guy, does a horrible crime, kills his wife or shoots up the school, and they say, "Oh my God, but he seemed like such a nice guy. He seemed like such a good person." It's like you don't know that there are all these different aspects of us that live inside this one thing called a body, and this thing called I, is actually not really unified. It's not really one thing. It's a composite of a whole bunch of different things.
Right. Sometimes in unique moments when we're engaged in ecstatic dance or singing a song or something, it all comes into harmony, all of those various disparate parts. But
most of the time, the I is related to whatever we're experiencing in that moment. So there's an I for every moment. There's like a part of you that is unique for every moment. And we get confused. We sometimes think that it's only one person. There's a unified personality in there. But really, every moment brings out a different aspect of you. So you're different in every moment. Hopefully not too different. But
right.
Not too different.
That's where you run into it's where you run into trouble is when you're really different constantly.
Yeah, but subtly different. In every moment. Like you're different with your kids than you are with, MZ or your, or your neighbors or your friends, or your wife. You're different with your wife than you are with your kids. And
that's part of the reason it's such a dramatic thing to have a relationship fall apart. It's that we've come to define ourselves through somebody else.
Yeah.
So, you're leaving me? Well, who am I?
Yeah. You've lost that part of you when the relationship falls apart. That part of you that was interacting with that other person is gone. So a part of you has died. And
that kind of hits it on the nail. Hits the nail on the head with regards to what we were saying about genetics. There's this sort of separation that happens when, oh no, it's the genes that are making all of these things happen.
Yeah.
It's so disempowering, and then it's also it's not you anymore.
Yeah. It's your genes.
Your selfhood's being taken away by some kind of computer printout of some test.
Yeah. Yeah. People. I remember Angelina Jolie, famous story. She cut her breasts off. She cut two of her breasts off because she had the gene for breast cancer. As if it's the gene that causes breast cancer.
Some very strange behavior there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also
no control over the cancer. It's the gene. So she had to disfigure herself. She had to remove her organs because of the gene, which had nothing to do with her. She didn't want cancer. Her genes. That's what was going to get her sick. Her genes. Nothing to do with her. It was her genes.